Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I know there's only me and a QA session separating everyone from the break, so I really feel the tension growing in the air. And our thirst, hunger, and bodily needs like pressing on me, so I try to be quick and painless. But before I start, I'd love to thank, the organizers of this two-day event for inviting me. And I'd love to pay a small tribute because I think my theoretical research wouldn't exist if I weren't able to confront myself daily with my partner in crime in the artist duo we founded 10 years ago, who's Nicolo Benetton, and my students. If I hadn't the possibility of confronting and sharing constantly, I think I would never do any kind of theoretical research. So I felt I had to share this. I signed this, but it's a sort of, let's say, of collective work in the end. Another brief premise before I begin. A few months ago, I published a book in which I tried to make the point about the relation between photography and video game. On the one hand, because in Italy we're a little behind the schedule, let's say, to be, gentle. On the other, because I felt I needed to lay down the ground around specific questions. And that's why 2/3 of the book basically focus not much on the practices of photography inside video games, but more on the consequences of this interaction between two media. I'm really interested in how photography and video game affect our conception of the self, our relation with the world. And I think that in this moment in which our lives have actually turned into a game, this connection is quite interesting. So today I'll talk about a very specific thing, and we are totally inside a video game, so there's no much room for like going wider. The video game is a very particular one, so I'll pay a small part of my presentation to properly describe it. But I'm really interested in what happens in this game because it doesn't only reposition photography and represent the photographic under a new light, or also, or better, it mobilizes the photographic, as many games do. But also, it's the activity of the gamers here that matters, and that actually let another, or let's say an unforeseen use of photography emerge inside this game. So let's begin with this. We know Elon Musk does a lot of weird things like naming his children after a computer password and stuff like that. But in 2013, he got in touch with a small English developing house, Hello Games, which at that time was working on a new game that already had created quite a hype because of some bold statements by the developers. The statement that caught everyone's attention was their belief that they were going to build the widest virtual world ever made. And of course, Elon Musk, as soon as he heard this, immediately got in touch with their chief engineer, asking if the possibility of generating such a wide world proved that we can actually live in a computer simulation. The question wasn't out of context because No Man's Sky is a survival space exploration game. So it means that we basically go around in this universe trying to survive, as the genre declares. But the developers achieved this incredibly vast digital world with a specific kind of algorithm process, which is a cascade of algorithms that, starting from a small number of fixed elements, recombine them almost at, let's say, indefinitely, until they're able to produce everything in the game, from planets to stars, animals on the left, starships on the right, weather, rocks, plants, everything. The number of planets that can be found in this game is this, which amounts basically to 18.5 quintillion stellar bodies that players can land on and explore. As it's clear, even though all the population of Earth started playing this game, things that, I really wish for Hello Games, but it's very unlikely, it would take us centuries to actually see this virtual world. And due to its procedural nature, this virtual world is quite peculiar because when we play a video game, usually we step in, even if we enter a level for the first time, we enter a virtual world that has been carefully built by a team of digital artists. So it means that the buildings, the landscapes, the blades of grass have already been seen by plenty of people. The creators themselves, but then the modelers in other countries who have been subcontracted for building the virtual environments, the beta testers, the first targets who test the video game outside the industry, and so on. So it's not a new world. We don't discover anything. We photograph things that have already been created by someone else. In this case, it's slightly different because when we step on a planet and the game says newly discovered planet, we actually see something that nobody else has seen before. That's why the developers at Hello Games actually programmed a series of bots that they call space probes, and they shot them through this universe because they actually don't know how this universe looks like. So this generates a very peculiar feeling because as players, we step in unknown places, and we are actually the first ones to see these places for real. The game is divided into 255 galaxies, each one containing thousands of stellar systems. So it takes years even for the most expert gamers to visit all these galaxies. And the game doesn't offer simply a very wide digital environment. It offers a spectacular one. So this excitement for discovery goes hand in hand with a high degree of spectacularity, which of course fuels this photographic attitude that most games today try to increase and trigger in the players. But the game is particular, as I was saying, for the attitude of its community. No Man's Sky is often described as a very successful game in terms of development and a total failure in terms of marketing, because the bold statements made during its development clashed with the initial release of the game. When players were given the game, they realized it had nothing except this huge universe. So there were almost no mechanics, no goals, no storyline, nothing. It almost looked like an art game. Or a sandbox. A few players like me really enjoyed this situation. You really felt like you were alone in the middle of nowhere, an experience very close to the romantic sublime, let's say. You were on the verge of this solitude. We all knew it was a multiplayer, but there were no chances to meet each other. So it was kind of a contradiction. So, I mean, the feeling of playing this game was quite unique. And immediately after its release, players started to envision ways in which they could interact. And this led to the construction of to the development of a series of strategies. Even though the game had almost nothing to do, you still had to commit to a fundamental need, which was surviving. So you had to rely on a simple tool, this one on the right corner, to do basically everything. You used it to mine resources from the landscape, to protect yourself, to explore the surrounding environment. And through these actions, the game manifested its, let's say, ideology. Which can be summed up in these 4 words. These are the core actions in No Man's Sky. You explore the space in order to map it. You need to exert the violence to protect yourselves. Then you need to build infrastructures, structures, and so on. And all of this is inserted into a big in-game economy. And this last aspect is why, at a certain point, photography becomes a key thing. I'll take a step back because at the beginning I said that the photographic is highly mobilized in this game, and the kind of photography that is mobilized is exactly this one. Going back to the roots of the medium, in that specific moment in which photography was a mixture of aesthetic, let's say, research, it was a language to be explored and applied to places that were conceived as beautiful because they were somehow, I mean, in particular in the US, they were connected to a specific gaze cast on the landscape. And at the same time, these photos were functional. I totally agree with German artist Armin Link and curator Stella Blaschke when, in a recent exhibition they held in Italy, they proposed that we reread part of the history of the photographic medium, thinking of it as information technology, so as a tool for the capturing, storage, and transferring of information. This was true for a large part of the history of the medium, although it's not an encompassing definition. There's way more than that. But in No Man's Sky, this is quite literal. This happens literally. In order to overcome and let's say find a solution to this apparent loneliness of playing, players exited the game and they started organizing outside it. Almost 10 years after today, this whole infrastructure and conglomerate of social media pages, website, third-party apps, Telegram channels, Discord channels, and so on, is called a meta structure, which means there is actually a structure that wraps the video game and offers what the video game doesn't. So it's an infrastructure for communication and mostly for the mapping of players in the digital universe. Thanks to different tools and channels, you can communicate your relative position to other players, and they can reach you, exchange goods with you, but most of all, they can exchange the coordinates of valuable goods. And here we go back to the beginning and the procedural nature of this video game. The procedurality of No Man's Sky means that everything is randomly generated. It means that I may be lucky enough to land on a planet that may support life or not, but also I might be lucky enough to find digital assets that are especially rare or valuable. But there's no way to predict where they are. So my ability to photograph them, to prove that they are there in a moment, and to communicate the position of these assets becomes a strategic thing. And that's where photography kicks in. So this is the kind of photographs that are shared by the player. In this case, the example is a starship. This is a particular valuable starship, a particular rare one. And this is a screenshot of one of the many posts on these kind of communities. Every time a player finds a valuable in-game asset, they apply a specific kind of photography, and you see it's very functional. Front view, rear view, side view, and some screenshots of the details of the ship that you can get, scanning it, and they post it. So in this way, players have the possibility of accessing goods that otherwise would take hours or even days of playing in order to be found, or perhaps you might never be found. You might never find them. I like to call this universe a sort of galactic slot machine. You can load it, but you never know what you get, and that's how the meta structure helps gamers. And it's so powerful that it affected the game at the point that even the developers acknowledged its existence and developed the game in order to accomplish some of the things that players were already doing outside the game. A good example of the meta structure is the fact that players have created even a cryptocurrency so that they can actually pay other people for their services. So it's not simply role-playing here, but it's something that literally expands the game. This idea of this possibility of locating resources has then turned into a specific gaze, a very predatory gaze that at a certain point trigger a total extractivist logic. Thanks to to this infrastructure, players were able to locate extraction sites where they could get those fictional mineral. It's called activating medium. In 2018, it is sold for a lot of money. And exploiting a construction glitch, players were able to stack rock extractors one on top of the other in order to build these impressive structures. They photographed them and promoted them online. If you were able to reach these planets in a few hours, you could become a multi-billionaire. So at that point, you were totally disrupting the logics of the game. And I was really interested in this moment because despite it's a sci-fi game and apparently it's set in a far future where we can actually roam galaxies after galaxies. The kind of structures that were built were strangely familiar. So I started photography in all of them, and actually this research is purely theoretical, but it's what I like to call a failed artist project, because I have thousands of screenshots, and only lately I realized that they were simply the support for some kind of reflection. I realized that what I was photographing were stereotypical gazes, and I started reconducting them back to the history of the medium. So although I found myself in front of these impressive creations that it required immense investments in terms of energy, time, and even game resources, they were simply something I could find on Earth. And this was extremely fascinating because it's as if we have actually imported a way of looking at the world and a photographic practice inside this game that apparently should allow us to do something else. And in order to conclude, I'd love to finish with this screenshot, which shows how this universe actually looks like. The surface of this universe is extremely colorful, psychedelic sometimes. Violence is sublimated, so you'll never see blood or pulp stuff in the game. But as soon as you turn your visor on, the world reveals for what it is. It's simply a virtual thing where you can locate resources, and trees are resources, the dirt is a resource, you can find minerals, air itself is another, atmosphere itself is another resource. So as soon as you turn on this interface, which is simply another simulation in the simulation, the virtual world appears for what it is. And it's really interesting to consider that many players refer to this game as a very relaxing experience. There's like a very slow pace. Violence is there, but it's not so fundamental. You could live a very peaceful life in this universe. But at the same time, as it's already been pointed out by many people, every time we play video games and we take pictures in games, we are actually working for the game. And especially in No Man's Sky, the concept of labor, which is a crisis of play and labor, can be literally applied. We don't simply roam this space. In order to survive, we actually move the economy. We dig the ground, we extract resources, we synthesize new materials, we sell them. And in doing that, we keep on taking pictures because we need to share them so that we can gain more assets. So it's, in my opinion, it's extremely fascinating because as many video games, this is a very good opportunity to start thinking about how concepts and historical notions that we are somehow comfy with so far intensify or change completely once they enter virtual worlds. Thank you. I think I can stop here.